So finally, guys, it is that time of year where coaches start changing jobs and teams make changes at the top, And Bosqueville's Clint Zander stepped down this week after a 15-year run leading the Bulldogs. So that program has fallen on hard times the last two seasons after a long run of being in the playoffs every year. They were 1-9 this season. Bosqueville was, but it is a school that still has had a lot of success in other sports. They were good in volleyball this year, state ranked. They're always, generally very good on the diamond, baseball, softball. So what do you guys think? Is this a, quote unquote sleeping giant, or at least can it get back to being, a perennial playoff contender?
Chad, you want to go first? I'm still getting my
Yeah,
thoughts.
it's a tough question to answer. I don't really, you mentioned getting into the weeds a minute ago. I don't really want to get into the specifics of why I think the things haven't gone well the last couple of years out there in Bosqueville. I know that there's, at least one guy that I can think of that was a super-centex player and then just wasn't a football player anymore. So that's a tough situation. I think it's probably though. I think Bosqueville is a job where a lot of different coordinator types in Central Texas would look over there and go, "I'd like to try my hand at being a head coach at a place like Bosqueville." Of course, you're sandwiched right there in between China Spring and La Vega. So the question is, are your good players gonna move 10 feet to the west or east and go play at those schools, or are you going to get a lot, and I don't want to act like high school football is a transfer portal situation. It sometimes feels like it is in Central Texas because we see kids move from one school to the next a lot. But I guess what I'm getting at with all of this is Bosqueville's numbers have to get better. I think in the program, their overall depth has to get better than it has been the last couple of
Participation
years.
numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, whenever I drive out there, like it's so close to China Spring that I'm just like, it's so easy for a lot of those kids to just look at, the Cougars with two back-to-back state championships and a team that is like buying, and then a baseball
Mm-hmm.
championship on top of that. Just like a program that seems to be growing every year and be like, I want to be part of that. And then on top of it, it's just because it is so small and those kids are going from football to basketball to baseball, and volleyball to, basketball
Mm-hmm.
to softball to track. And, they're there from the time that they're tiny to the time that they graduate. Um, I, I think it's more of just like maybe you get tired at a certain point and like maybe you're like, well, I got to choose one sport over another at a certain point. um it's yeah, I think eventually if the right people are there and they can build a sort of culture about it, I think they've got the potential to be bigger. Because I mean, you look at Crawford and they're like way out there. And they're a team that even on the years that they're not doing as well as they usually are, they're still doing a lot better than a lot of the other
They're
small
still
schools.
in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
and
that's exactly where I was going to go,
mhm.
DJ. I think it's a great point. Uh, would you look at Bosqueville and Crawford and each of their respective athletes and say Crawford is just miles ahead of Bosqueville just by sheer athleticism? I don't think you would. I think the kids are similar, and so what makes the difference in Crawford? You mentioned that word culture, and it gets thrown around a lot, and sometimes maybe it can feel a little meaningless or whatever. But Crawford absolutely has a culture, and it sort of builds on itself, and it bleeds from one sport to the next. And those kids go out on the field and they expect to win, and that matters. And it like one of the things that they talk about with like playing Crawford in volleyball is we've got to clear this mental hurdle that we can beat Crawford. And so Bosqueville needs kind of a culture shift, I think. And that's not a slam on Clint Zander at all. I actually think Clint did a really good job. Obviously had a long sustained run of success, and if you also add in the fact that for a good chunk of that he was also the head softball coach, they went to 3 state tournaments, they won a state championship. That's nothing to sneeze at. So
Well, when you get into these 2A schools too, and we'd been talking about Crawford and talking about Bosqueville, Chilton, Mart, all 2A schools, probably all pretty similar in size. And all of them have ebbs and flows. I mean, Mart, it's less obvious when your ebb is
11-2.
Yeah. And when you expect to win the state championship every year, when you don't, that's your low tide, But Chilton went through 5 or 10 years of not being very good, probably closer to 10 years of not being very good. Crawford, even though they're pretty consistent, they've had a 5 and 6 year in there. They had not a great year this year. And so because it's 2A, because it's a small school, the depth is gonna rise and fall a little bit. And that's gonna, and it affects how, whether or not coaches stay there and whether coaches are asked to stay there, I guess. Because when we were talking about Chilton a minute ago, I was thinking about the fact that Lucky Gamble has had success there since I've been around here. Robert Little had success there since I've been around here. And now Coach Hewitt, right?
Benny Hewitt.
Benny Hewitt's having success there.
Yeah. And I agree with all of that. Bosqueville has had coaches who've come in and done it for a short time and then left, like a Lee Wigginton. He was a guy that kind of used Bosqueville as a stepping stone to other jobs. He coached at Mahia, and then he got up to like 5A, 6A level, and John Bechtel spent several years at Bosqueville, and then now he's at Fairfield and has been there a long time. Clint Zander spent, 15 years at Bosqueville. So what Bosqueville needs, I think, is someone to come in, establish that culture, and then stick around, and do it for a long time. So we'll see who they hire. As Chad said, I do think there'll be coordinators and stuff, maybe even head coaches at programs that they just feel like they need to move, and so I think they'll have some interest in that position. So I think Bosqueville has the chance to get a good coach, and so we'll see how that plays out.